So The Boys is done. 5 seasons. Homelander is dead. Butcher is dead. And somewhere out there, a guy who read all 72 issues of the Garth Ennis comic is sitting in a chair, staring at the ceiling, deeply confused about what he just watched. Because here is the thing. The show and the comics share a name, a premise, and a handful of characters. After that, you are in almost completely different territory. And today, we're going to break down exactly where the two versions split apart, why those changes happened, and honestly, which version actually got it right. Let us start from the very beginning, because the foundation of The Boys is different in both versions in a way that changes everything that comes after it. In the show, Billy Butcher and his crew are underdogs. They are a scrappy black ops CIA team working in the shadows, trying to take down people who can throw buses. They are outmatched, outgunned, and they know it. That tension is the whole show. It is what makes seasons 1 and 2 so gripping. But in the comics, the boys actually have Compound V running through their veins from the start. Every member of the team, except Hughie at first, already has superpowers. They can go fist to fist with any member of the Seven and hold their ground. That changes the entire vibe. The comics are less of a thriller and more of a brutal action story where two groups of powered people beat each other senseless. The show made the right call here. Turning the boys into genuine underdogs gave every confrontation real stakes. When Season 3 gave Butcher and Hughie temporary powers through Temp V, it felt like a major escalation, not a standard Tuesday. Now let us talk about Hughie, because the two versions of this character are basically two different people who happen to share a name. In the comics, Hughie is drawn to look like Simon Pegg, which is a fun bit of trivia because Simon Pegg plays Hughie's dad in the show. Jack Quaid's version looks nothing like that, and that is fine. But the personality differences go much deeper than looks. Comic Hughie is the guy who eventually kills A-Train. Not reluctantly, not in self-defense. Out of pure revenge for Robin's death and for what A-Train did to Starlight. It is a dark, definitive moment that defines the comic's overall tone. Show Hughie's first kill is translucent, a character who does not even exist in the comics, invented entirely for the TV adaptation. And by the finale, show Hughie ends up forgiving A-Train. He chooses to let go of that revenge. That is not just a character difference. That is the entire philosophical difference between the two stories packaged into one relationship. Here is where the comics get genuinely hard to sit with, and where the show made perhaps its most significant departure. In the source material, Ryan Butcher is born, attacks Billy almost immediately, and Billy kills the infant. That is it. Scene over. It is pure shock value, which the comics leaned into heavily throughout their entire run. The show took that same character and turned him into one of the most important figures in the entire story. Ryan growing up, struggling with his identity, being the only naturally born soup in the world, and ultimately being the one who helps bring down his own father, Homelander. That is a 5-season arc. That is emotional payoff built brick by brick. Becca follows a similar pattern. In the comics, Becky dies during childbirth. The show kept her alive through Season 1 and 2, gave her real scenes, gave her a real relationship with Ryan, and then killed her at the end of Season 2 in a moment that hit much harder because we had actually grown to care about her. The comics used both characters as plot devices. The show turned them into people. This one is fascinating because the core idea is almost identical between the two versions, but the context is completely different. In the show, Homelander abandons a hijacked plane midair. Everyone dies. It becomes a political weapon Vought uses to argue that superheroes should be embedded in the military. Later, Queen Maeve uses footage of it to keep Homelander in check, and eventually Starlight blows the whole thing wide open. In the comics, the flight disaster is tied directly to September 11th. The Seven intercept one of the planes heading toward the World Trade Center, kill the terrorists, and then completely fail at everything else, causing the plane to crash into the Brooklyn Bridge instead. Vought spends enormous resources burying that story. The show could not use 9/11 as a story beat without it becoming something very different. So instead, they created their own version of the same idea. Powerful people failing catastrophically and then covering it up. The message lands the same way. The execution had a change point. One of the most significant structural changes between the comics and the show involves who assaulted Starlight and why that matters. In the show, it is the Deep. He is the one who corners Annie in that first episode. It defines his character for the entire run. He becomes this pathetic, delusional figure constantly failing at redemption, and his eventual end, being impaled by an octopus in the ocean, is perfectly, absurdly fitting. In the comics, the Deep had nothing to do with it. Starlight's assault in Garth Ennis' version involved A-Train, Homelander, and Black Noir, 3 members of the 7. And comic book Deep was actually one of the more reasonable members of the group. Business-minded, mature. He is the only member of the 7 who survives the entire story. The show's version of the Deep shares nothing with that character except the name and the fish powers. By reassigning the assault to him, the writers created one of the show's most complex, uncomfortable character trajectories. It gave Kevin a story that the comic never bothered giving him. In the comics, the main corporate antagonist is a character named James Stillwell. He is cold, methodical, and genuinely inhuman in how he approaches every situation. He has one objective: protect Vought's interests. Nothing else exists for him. The show split that character in 2. Madeline Stillwell handles the 7 directly, using personal manipulation and Homelander's psychological vulnerabilities to keep him in line. Stan Edgar runs Vought at the macro level, making the kind of decisions that reshape entire industries. What is interesting is that Madeline has something James never had: visible fear. She knows exactly what Homelander is capable of. That fear is what makes her interesting to watch. James Stillwell in the comics never breaks a sweat. Madeline spends most of her time trying not to get killed by the person she is supposed to be managing. Splitting the role into 2 characters gave the show more room to explore what corporate control over superhero power actually looks like from different angles. Now, this one might be the most important creative decision the show made. In the comics, the female, as she is simply called, is the boy's main weapon. She is powerful, she is unpredictable, and she barely has a backstory. She ate some Compound V as a baby and became a killing machine. Frenchie is the only one who can communicate with her at all, and that relationship only becomes romantic right at the very end of the story. The show took that character, gave her a name, Kimiko, gave her a history as a child soldier, gave her a voice, eventually and literally in Season 5, and built one of the most emotionally resonant arcs in the entire series. Her journey from a trafficked weapon to someone capable of love, connection, and sacrifice is the kind of character work that elevates the whole show. Karen Fukuhara's performance pushed that even further. She carried scenes without saying a single word for years. And when Kimiko finally speaks in Season 5, it carries weight that the comics never came close to reaching. Oh, how did all of this lead to 2 very different endings? The comics close with the cycle of violence consuming almost everyone. It is bleak, conclusive, and thematically consistent with Garth Ennis' post 9/11 worldview. The message is essentially, systems of power destroy people, and the people trying to fight those systems often get destroyed too. The show went somewhere different. Kimiko strips Homelander of his powers in the Oval Office using an ability reverse-engineered from Soldier Boy. Butcher beats him down and kills him for Becca. Then Butcher, consumed by his own darkness, tries to release a virus that would kill all supes. Hughie stops him. Butcher dies at the hands of the person he spent 5 seasons protecting. It is a tragic ending that still leaves room for hope. The surviving members of the boys find something close to peace. Hughie and Annie are together. Mother's Milk is back with his family. Even Kimiko gets a quiet, thoughtful moment in a cafe. The show asked a different question than the comics did. Instead of, does the system inevitably win? It asked, can people break the cycle of violence before it consumes them? The answer it gave was, sometimes barely, at great cost. Here's the bottom line. The Boys comics and the Boys TV show are not really the same story. They share a skeleton. The meat and the soul are completely different. Garth Ennis wrote a brutal, unrelenting middle finger aimed at an entire genre. Eric Kripke took that premise and built something that asked harder questions about power, trauma, and whether people can actually change. Neither version is wrong. They're just doing different things. If you have only watched the show, the comics are worth reading. Just go in knowing they're going to hit you differently and not always in a fun way. And if you have only read the comics, the show is genuinely worth the time. Some of the changes it made are, honestly, improvements. Either way, the world needs more fiction willing to ask who is really watching The Watchmen. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this one, and drop a comment telling me which version you think got it right.